Are you involved in a business or thinking about starting one? Do you know there may be environmental impacts from business activities? According to the Environmental Protection Act of 1996, businesses such as gas stations, rice mills, large-scale agriculture and poultry farms, large-scale mining and forestry operations, hotels, and resorts must be authorized. Persons proposing any of these activities need to submit an application for environmental authorization to the EPA.
Hello and welcome to The Environment Matters, a monthly production of the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana, where we explore the work of the agency in fulfilling its mandate of biodiversity conservation and environmental management. I am your hostess, Aretha Ford. Biodiversity, or biological diversity, is the variety of all life on Earth. And we look at biodiversity from different levels. From the ecosystems, which we can define as a community of plants and animals that live together and interact with each other and their physical environment. In some ecosystems, we know forests, deserts, tundras. We also look at biodiversity from the species level. And species biodiversity speaks to the variety of plants and animals within a given ecosystem. So one ecosystem can have a wide variety of biodiversity, such as rivers or forests. And we speak of genetic diversity that looks at the variation within a species. So if you're like me and you like pepper, you can appreciate that there are different kinds of pepper. For example, your bell peppers, your riri pepper, your sweet pepper, and of course the list goes on and on. Species richness or high levels of biodiversity depend on the ecosystem and how far or close from the equator they're found. In Guyana, we are quite fortunate to be located close to the equator. And we're also located in the Amazon basin where our ecosystems are not only high in diversity, but they contain many giants of the Americas, for example, the jaguar, the harpy eagle, the Victoria lily, and they contain endemic species, those plants and animals that can only be found in one particular part of the world. We have a lot of endemic species in Guyana. The plants and animals found in our various ecosystems are useful to each other and, of course, to us as humans, from providing food and shelter to containing life-saving compounds that go into our traditional and man-made medicines or synthetic medicines. And surely we can appreciate the need to study and document our biodiversity for our present needs and, of course, for the benefit of future generations. EPA, as the lead environmental regulator, of course, has a role to play in biodiversity conservation, as you would hear when I give the introduction to the program. And to look a bit further into our role when it comes to biodiversity conservation, I have two first-timers here in the studio with me today. We have Mr. Niru Narayan, who is a Senior Environmental Officer attached to the Technical Services Department. And as regular viewers of the program, you would know that the Technical Services Department is quite busy. They look at air, noise, biodiversity. And so Niru is here to talk about the department's work in biodiversity. And we have another first timer, Ms. Ria Kanai. She is a Senior Environmental Officer who is attached to our Multilateral Environmental Agreements Unit. Now that's very long words. So from now on, we'll say our MEAs unit. So Niru and Ria, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So audience, today we want to go a bit in depth when it comes to biodiversity research and the EPA.
So, Niru, we'll start with you, and we'd like to lay the foundation by talking about the agency's legal responsibility when it comes to biodiversity.
Well, basically, the Environment Protection Agency is guided by the Environmental Protection Act of 1996, which basically sets out the functions and responsibility of the agency in biodiversity management. This includes, but is not limited to, the coordination and maintenance of a program for the conservation of biological diversity and its sustainable use, and to take such steps as necessary for the effective management of the natural environment, so as to ensure the conservation, protection, and sustainable use of its natural resources. In this regard, we have three main program areas that have responsibilities with biodiversity. These include the Technical Services Department, responsible for the issuance of biodiversity research permits and assessing the impacts of various projects on biodiversity, and also devising mitigation measures in an effort to conserve biodiversity in Guyana. We also have the MEA team, responsible for coordinating and implementing various MEA conventions, for example, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Nagoya Protocol, just to name a few. And of course, we have the Communication Department, who look at relaying information on biodiversity to the public.
Yes, and of course, these program areas are supported by our legal unit as well as our corporate services department. So, Ria, I know Nihar would have stolen a bit of your thunder there, but I would like for you to go a bit further to give a little more detail into the MEAs, those agreements to which Guyana is a signatory that deals with biodiversity.
Okay. First off, thank you for having me today. My first time. So Guyana and the Environmental Protection Agency's focal point for the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, as Niru mentioned. Now, this is an international convention that governs the sustainable use of biodiversity, its conservation, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from its use. This convention has two protocols, the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. So this convention governs the use and transport of living modified organisms, LMO. So these would have been organisms that have been modified due to modern biotechnology and may pose risks to human health and biodiversity. And we have the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing. This protocol is responsible for, or it governs, the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from utilization of genetic resources. Now, under this protocol, that is where EPA has the mandate to issue research permits.
All right, so I'm very glad you touched on research permits because that is going to be the meat of our discussion today. So, Niru, as the officer who deals directly with research permits, we want to talk about that process, what it entails, what are some of the documents that are required. But before we do that, I know there are two types of permits that are issued, right? There's one for biodiversity research and one for biodiversity filming. So, how do these two types of permits or these two types of activities differ?
Well, firstly, biodiversity research permit would entail studying of the diverse species that we have in our ecosystem. For example, the taxonomy, its classification, morphology, physiology, the abundance, the impacts of it, and conservation measures. Biodiversity research would also look at the ecosystem services that biodiversity provides. Ecosystem services are basically the benefits that humans derive from biodiversity, such as medicine, food and nutrient cycling, its cultural values, and so on. Film, on the other hand, looks basically at capturing imagery and video footage of, for example, various organisms in their habitat and documenting their natural behavior and other aspects of biodiversity, such as the cultural values and so on, so that we can basically appreciate its value and also gather new information.
All right. And so, as an officer who's been with the agency for quite some time, I've been privileged to see a few of the end products of biodiversity filming. And I can assure you, audience, that what we have is it's amazing. Our various cultures, different plants and animals that you can find in Guyana. And so I encourage you to head on over to YouTube and just have a look at those documentaries that are produced on Guyana's rainforest, especially. So Niru, I would imagine, as someone who is working day to day with biodiversity filming and research, you have an appreciation for those things that you just mentioned.
I do.
Great. So let's talk about the process. How does this start? If someone from overseas or even a local person is interested in either service, how do they go about getting a permit?
Well, the application starts by basically submitting the application and the supporting documents. This application form can be easily obtained from EPA's website, which is epaguyana.org. Some of the supporting documents that we'll need to submit also would be, for example, in the case of biodiversity research, a research proposal. Also, we'll also need letters of support or no objection letters from the various agencies and relevant stakeholders. For example, a letter of support or no objection letter from the Ministry of Ambient Affairs if research will be done in indigenous communities. Another example could be a letter of support or no objection letter from the Protected Area Commission if research is done in the protected areas of Guyana. In the case of biodiversity research also, they also need to submit an ethics approval letter from the institution that they are affiliated with. For example, that may be a university or maybe a conservation society. And also the curriculum vitae. The applicant can basically choose to submit these documents as a soft copy by email to our website, to our email, which is epa@epaguyana.org, or they can come in and choose to submit a physical copy of these documents. After that, after the submission, they would pay an application fee, which is US $75, which can be paid in US or in Guyana dollars. And the third step will be screening. We basically look at their applications and their supporting documents and review it. And we prepare the biodiversity permit with the relevant permit conditions. After that, the next step will be the payment of the permit fee. And finally, the issuance of the permit. Basically, they come in and collect their permit so they can proceed on their biodiversity research or filming activity.
All right. And so when they would have commenced their filming or their research, what is the next step? Are they required to provide reports to the agency, or is it just we take our research and we leave the country?
No, after a given time span, they would have to submit a report of their findings, or they can, or in the case of filming, they would submit the video footage or imagery after a period of time.
All right. And I think, audience, we can appreciate how biodiversity research would tie into our various obligations under the different environmental agreements. And Rio, you would have spoken earlier about the Nagoya Protocol, right, on access to benefit sharing from biodiversity use. And so in order to know what benefits are obtained, we have to know what's there first. And so these researchers also lend to Guyana being able to fulfill its obligations. And of course, if a researcher by chance finds some compound in a plant or animal that can perhaps cure one of the diseases that we currently have no cure for, then of course we want to ensure that Guyana gets its fair share of whatever profits or notoriety are to be had from that. So I'm sure we can appreciate that while the process is simple, how important it is for the country and for the world at large. All right. So it's at this point, audience, that we will take an ad break. Do stay tuned and we will see you on the other half.
Do you have an environmental complaint? Then the Environmental Protection Agency wishes to advise that you can report an environmental complaint at the agency via one of the following. You can call our 24-hour hotline number at 225-5469, or you can drop us an email at complaints@epaguyana.org. Or you can message us on our Facebook page at EPA Guyana, or you can message us directly on Instagram at EPAGY. Please note, when submitting an environmental complaint, you would need to submit the following: name of complainant, that is the person who is making the complaint, the address of that person, a contact number, as well as the alleged polluter, a name for them, or a name of their business, their location, and the nature of the complaint. For further information, you can visit our agency's head office at Ganges Street, Sophia, or you can visit one of the regional offices to make your environmental complaint. You can visit our WIM office in the Quarantine or our Linden office in the Lynn Building, Mackenzie, Linden. Please note that all information collected from the public will be treated with the strictest confidence. However, complainants should be willing to attend court and testify should the matter require legal action.
Welcome back to the Environment Matters. In the first half of our program, our new first-time guests, Mr. Niru Narain and Ms. Ria Kanai, both senior environmental officers at the Environmental Protection Agency, who are attached to the Technical Services Department and our MEA's unit, respectively. We're talking about biodiversity research at the EPA. In the first half of our program, we would have covered some simple steps that one can take if they're interested in conducting biodiversity research. We would have covered EPA's role in biodiversity conservation in Guyana. And so in this half of the program, we want to continue talking about the partners who are part of the research process, because you would have mentioned a few of the agencies that also have a part to play. So let's talk about some others. As we know, the environment is everybody's business. So, Niru. Yes.
Yes. So some of the agencies and NGOs that have responsibility to the biodiversity include the Protected Area Commission, as mentioned before. They basically manage and maintain and conserve the protected areas of Guyana. For example, Shell Beach, Kaieteur National Park. We also have Guyana Wildlife Conservation and Management Commission. They oversee the conservation and sustainable management of wildlife. We also have Conservation International Guyana. Their goal is basically to protect the fundamental aspects of nature, our livelihoods, and maintain a stable climate. And another a good mention is the IOCRAM International Center.
Yes.
They look after the sustainable management and utilization of multiple resources of tropical forests and the conservation of biological diversity. So all of these agencies are involved in the entire biodiversity process. What we do basically is that we advise the applicants to engage with these relevant agencies to obtain the required approval letters or letters of support to conduct the research. This is done as a means to obtain prior informed consent and to avoid any conflicts that may arise from their biodiversity research. This engagement also allows for the applicant to be properly guided in their research so that they follow all required protocols, precautions, guidelines necessary to ensure the safety of the research team and to reduce the impacts of their research or filming on biodiversity. Finally, this engagement also allows for the easy access and sharing of information and other resources between the two parties so that they may benefit from the research.
Yes, and Niru, when you mentioned FPAC-free prior and informed consent, what came to my mind instantly is the Escazú Agreement, of which Guyana is also a signatory, but I know that that particular convention does not come under the remit of the agency. So it was just something that struck my mind. And so even without the Escazú Agreement, we were following, the protocols that were required, especially when you have to engage hinterland communities or Amerindian communities, because I know there's a difference between hinterland and Amerindian. This I digress. All right, so Niru, as an officer who works directly with the biodiversity research process, on average, how many applications does the agency receive per year? And can you give a further breakdown as to how many are received for filming and how many for research?
Well, so far we actually received over, on average, we receive approximately 6 biodiversity research per month and approximately 2 one or two filming activities. So on a yearly basis, it varies, but it may add up to about 20 or so research applications.
All right. And of course, with Guyana being more and more prominently placed among the giants in the oil industry, one can imagine that the interest in our country is going to increase, and therefore, persons would want to come and see what Guyana has to offer. Not only in the oil and gas industry, but when it comes to our world-renowned biodiversity and our conservation efforts. So I think you'll have your hands full for quite some time. All right, so that's a lot of data to handle, though, because even though the numbers might sound small, it's still a lot of data to handle. Was there anything of particular interest that came out in any of the research that you've seen so far?
Well, just recently, a new species of butterfly was recently discovered in our rainforest in Guyana. This goes to show that there are many unexplored areas of rainforest and so much more to discover. There are also numerous other biodiversity research that have been conducted or are still underway, such as conservation of critically endangered species of birds, looking at the medicinal properties of plants, jaguar monitoring, converting sawmill dust into activated charcoal. So we at EPA are just happy to be part of this research process and provide as much guidance and technical assistance as possible to ensure that these projects and research are well executed and successful.
All right, so I can imagine how exciting it is, when you see that final report from the researcher, you see that final film and you think, wow, I was a small part, or I was, a part of something so fundamental. And it's amazing. I can assure you, audience, that our country is truly amazing. All right, so Ria, I come to you now. So with all that we would have learned about biodiversity research, how does this now help Guyana to fulfill its obligations under those conventions that you mentioned earlier? And how does biodiversity research fit into the LCDS 2030?
Very good question, Arita. Thank you. I just want to note that Guyana, the people, were diverse. Biodiversity is equally as diverse. So back to your question. Under the Nagoya Protocol, as Nero been mentioning, we're responsible for issuing research permits. So what that also entails that it doesn't belong to the researcher, but it belongs to the government of Guyana. And the protocol ensures that whatever locals, their expertise, local expertise have been used, or even resources, that those people are credited, their traditional knowledge is credited. Secondly, Guyana is obligated under the CBD Convention to submit national reports. So these national reports, we have to submit it approximately every 2 years, and it contains processes or strategies that we plan to and what we're currently doing to conserve biodiversity. So just recently, in December 2022, the CBD Secretariat finalized the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, or is also known as the Montreal Targets. It has 23 targets, and those are the targets parties to the convention will be working on to achieve by 2030. So, of course, Guyana is party to that. So those plans, those are something that we're now working on. And lastly, in terms of our national document, the National Strategic Plan, the LCS 2030, biodiversity is of utmost importance. Knowing biodiversity, knowing our biodiversity resources, having data, having documentation is very important because it tells us what biodiversity assets the country has. Without knowing that, we would not know what to conserve, what we have at all. All right? And most importantly, the LCDS 2030 mentions establishing a biodiversity research center. Now, this center will bridge local and national biodiversity data, and it will also open opportunities for networking among partners.
All right, that sounds like something that Guyanese should be eagerly anticipating, so that you two audience can get a look into what entails in our various ecosystems. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, do stay connected to the EPA by picking up a copy of the Sunday Chronicle and the Guyana Times to read our weekly column. Tune into your favorite television and radio stations for our bi weekly interviews. Interact with us on social media by liking our Facebook page, our Instagram account, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, tune into your favorite station, NTN Channel 11, for the broadcast of this program. Niru and Ria, thank you so much for being our guest today. Stay safe, everyone, and remember to respect each other and the environment.
Miss Sonia, wait, I want to ask you something.
Oh gosh,
Miss Sonia.
morning, Miss Cheryl. I'm late for work.
I noticed the other day y'all had a big campaign with them police officers, so shutting down them people barbecue, wedding, dance. Man, how y'all expect these people to make money and survive?
Oh, Miss Cheryl, that is far from the truth. The EPA and the Guyana Police Force are actually working together to ensure that persons who conduct certain businesses and activities are authorized. We've tried to allow them to adhere to the noise regulations.
Well, this gonna be a new law. What law is this?
These laws were always in place. It's now that we're getting all these complaints at the agency, we are trying to enforce them. The Environmental Protection Act has been in place since 1996, and it states that persons and businesses must apply for environmental authorization before operating a sound-making device.
Well, girl, I never know this thing is prior to the law.
So if you're keeping a barbecue or an open-air function, like a wedding or a concert, especially in your community, right, and you're playing a music system, you have to apply for a short-term noise permit. And for persons that operate in a business and you got generators and stuff, you have to apply for a long-term permit. And that is applicable to bars and hotspots and clubs also.
Well, now that you explain it, I understand it. It's unfair to the elderly, sick people, and even them little children.
That is correct. According to the World Health Organization, loud noise can cause stress, sleep deprivation, and hearing impairment. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that.
Oh, now I understand. Thank you for explaining it, Miss Sonia.
For more information, you can contact the EPA at 225-5471 or visit our office at Ganji Street, North Sophia, Georgetown.
Come around, please.
Morning. My name is Deborah. I just want to get some information.
Good morning. I am Odessa Duncan, Senior Environmental Officer. How may I assist you today?
Tell me something. They got this man next door by me breaking on this big building, and it's bare asbestos in the roof. I could remember hearing on your TV program that asbestos is dangerous to human health and the environment.
This is correct. The Environmental Protection Act states that any person or facility that is storing, treating, transporting, and or disposing of hazardous waste material must be authorized by the EPA to do so.
Oh, but it's now I'm really hearing about this hazardous waste thing. Tell me something more.
Hazardous waste are waste material with properties that are dangerous or capable of having a harmful effect on human health and the environment, including things like paint, fertilizers, and pesticides, waste oil, and asbestos. These things have the potential to cause cancer, birth defects, kidney failure, and reproductive impairment. with children being at the highest risk. The environmental authorization in this case gives the legal right to transport, store, and dispose of this material in accordance with the EPA Act Chapter 2005 Laws of Guyana. Now, this ensures you and your operation and your process is safe for the environment and human health.
So you mean to tell me that all them leftover Christmas paint that I got on in my kitchen sink, I need authorization from EPA to get rid of it?
No, Miss Deborah. These items, once used for household purposes, does not require environmental authorization from the EPA. However, you should still take necessary steps to ensure that these materials are stored and disposed of in an environmentally safe manner.
Thank you so much for the information. I go in and tell him that he needs an environmental authorization. Thank you.